The pyramid was the first part of the game where I absolutely needed a guide. I really do like that you get to go into a pyramid for a fully fledged dungeon, though. You never got to do that in Link to the Past. I mean, the GBA version technically had you going into the pyramid to get to the Palace of the Four Swords, but that was called the Palace, not the pyramid. And it's not like the walls of the dungeon were golden, so it never felt like I was going inside of a pyramid. It felt like it was just like the pyramid had a pocket dimension portal to another place entirely. Here, though, we're actually going inside of a pyramid, and it's to the point where eventually it has a section of it that is this one huge circle, and it really makes you feel like it's a pyramid. You never do get to go upstairs, though, which is weird because a pyramid is supposed to be really tall. So it seems like kind of a waste to never have any upper floors when a pyramid is supposed to be really tall, and so it would be a huge waste of architectural space. So each of the worlds in this game has a fourth sub-stage that was cut. And these cut levels are still present and would have been the third section of their respective worlds. In some cases, most of their content has merged with the second section of the world, but some are unique. These sections are all complete or near to it, although they all use the name Tingle's Tower for some reason, which is something that I didn't mention before. Also, there's a cut health and safety warning screen for this game, which you can see in Twilight Princess. I'm not really sure why they cut it, and why they didn't just do that for every other game, since it's totally pointless and just makes it take longer to get to the title screen. Is anyone else sick of giant bombs by this point? I mean, they really seem to overuse it as a level hazard. Like, it's one thing to have it once in a level, but to have it, like, 4 different times? That's ridiculous. There's also unused map icons for 8 test maps in this game. Well, the final game doesn't use maps, unfortunately. It would be great if this game did have maps, though. Because then you'd obviously have the benefit of having a map. And you'd think that having the GBA connected would allow you to see a map on the screen as a benefit of having it. But instead, the only way you can get a map at all is to have the Nintendo Power Guide, because then it shows you a full map of every level. But instead, fortunately, while Zelda 2 didn't have dungeon maps either, it was a problem there because the level design of the dungeons repeated themselves. So it made it incredibly tedious. Eventually, every dungeon became a labyrinth halfway through the game, and I couldn't stand it anymore. But this game obviously doesn't repeat level design for the dungeons over and over again. Like, every room feels unique, so it's not really a problem that there's no map. You're not going to be constantly getting lost or anything like that. It just seems like a weird omission now that I think about it. It makes it so that there's one less thing to look forward to collecting with the chess. In normal Zelda games, you would get to collect the compass and the map and the big key. Instead, you only collect a big key to open a chest to get a huge amount of force gems. Like, all you collect in the chest, aside from Heart Container and the occasional blue bracelet, are force gems. And when you get a big key, what do you get from that? More force gems. That's the biggest problem with this game, is that for the most part, all you get from the chests as a reward for exploring are force gems, which are worthless once you get enough to beat the level, because there's never any proper rupee sinks for it. At least in Wind Waker, you have to collect enough money so you can pay Tingle and progress with the game. I mean, nobody liked that rupee sink, but still. Oh yeah, this is where I needed to use a guide. There's these blocks that have never been seen before, and they don't stick out Like, they stick out of the wall, but they don't pop out at you at all. So I completely overlooked them. Because they kind of sort of blend in with the wall, with the same general color. And I'd never seen them before. I never really had a reason to focus on them, consistently using them. So I totally overlooked that you need to push 2 blocks into a wall to open both doors. And, like, how is it intuitive that both doors open? And yeah, so I needed a guide to progress. But once you know that, it's actually a pretty fun level. Aside from the mummies. The mummies are easily the biggest problem with this level. Because they take up they're brick walls of health that take forever to kill. The best strategy is to constantly spin attack, but you're constantly moving around a little bit as you do the quick spin attack. And so there's a risk of getting hurt by them, by walking into them for contact damage. For some reason you have to charge up the slingshot to hit both switches. But yeah, like, just fighting them is dangerous, so it can get annoying trying to fight them. And the big thing is that they don't flinch. They don't even get knocked back when you attack them. So they're just annoying, and you constantly have to fight them over and over again to progress. And plus, this level also has backtracking because, well, I'm sure you don't have any backtracking in single player because every Link has its own inventory slot. So you wouldn't have to constantly backtrack to, say, get the items that you're going to get later in this dungeon. But yeah, like, you beat the mummies and then they pad things out by forcing you to go into the Dark World and beat the Stalfos when you didn't have to do that when you had to beat all the enemies in the room, in the circular room. That big circular room is part of what makes going through this place feel like a pyramid. Because it's like, you can easily imagine that, well, the problem is that the big circular room isn't the only major room in the dungeon. So it's not like it's taking up, well, maybe it is taking up the majority of the space of it, but I don't know. It probably isn't. And once again, there's a tedious part where I had to wander around for a really long time trying to figure out where to put the Moon Pearl. I like that you can hit them with the slingshot and kill them at least, but there's a lot of stuff in the way blocking the pellets from hitting them. Link to the Past sprite of Link was cut and can be seen in trailers, which makes sense since there's so many Link to the Past references in this game. I'm really glad that they went with the Minish Cap sprite instead because it looks way better. It doesn't have pink hair, for one. There's a cut blue enemy from Four Swords that required 2 players to pull on both sides of it, revealing its weak point. And it wouldn't have worked as well in single player. But the thing is that eventually they did have a single player version of Four Swords, and they just solved the problem by having the AI links that follow behind you. When you grabbed onto them, they would automatically start pulling it apart from the other side. So it was fine. They could have just done that for this game. But yeah, this is the room where I got stuck before I looked up a guide, because I was naturally led to go into this room first because this was the only room that was unlocked. Sure, it was the furthest away from the entrance to the main room, but it was still the only door that was open at the time, so I naturally assumed that I had to go there first when there was no way I could have possibly progressed in it. So that was annoying. Also, did you notice that the music is all distorted and surreal when you're in the Dark World? And like, there's a wavy effect too. It's pretty unique for this game. And the Ganon test level in this game contains an older name for the Palace of the Winds, Seal. There's 2 unused items, a shield and the Lens of Truth. I'm really glad that the shield wasn't made an item in this game, because then not only would you not even have it the majority of the time, because you can only have one item slot, and you mostly just have like other items, but also you'd have to hold A just to block it all. So I'm really glad they didn't go with that decision. And the Lens of Truth, that would have been interesting. You'd actually be able to see like hidden floors that are invisible otherwise. But it ended up being totally pointless since later on you can just, it turned out that they could just have you light torches, and those would make the floors visible. So really it would have just been a kind of a waste of an item. And there's also leftovers from Wind Waker in this game. The hookshot, the mirror shield, and the magic armor. So like the hookshot would have been pretty interesting. Like you could have hookshotted over to that ledge, for example, instead of having to backtrack all the way over there just to get the level 2 Pegasus boots. That thank goodness doesn't disappear after a while, so I could actually go back and collect it quickly. So like you were forced to do a whole bunch of backtracking just to get that heart container. If I was in multiplayer mode, I wouldn't have had to do that at all. But yeah, like the hookshot like would have been interesting. Like I'm obviously thinking of how it would have worked in Link to the Past being applied to here. Like that would have been cool. But it wouldn't really have been necessary. And like the mirror shield. The mirror shield would have let you block. Well, I think it would have worked like the way it did in Wind Waker. Like, it would have been interesting, I guess, to have a light puzzle in a top-down Zelda game. It would have certainly been a lot less irritating than it was in 3D, where you had to aim it in a very precise way that wasn't really intuitive. But if the mirror shield was the way it was in Link to the Past, it would just have you block beams, and they could have easily programmed the beams to not be in the game in the first place. The first partially unseen room in this game is the first cutscene with Zelda and the Maidens. It has stained glass windows like in the Sanctuary, and at the top of the large room against the wall is the symbol of the bird that's in the middle of the place. But in the cutscene you can't see it. The second room is the end where Zelda looks through a window. The left side is invisible in game. It's green and kind of glitchy looking. I guess they really didn't intend you to see it. This boss is insultingly easy compared to A Link to the Past. Or at least that's what I thought at first, because look at how slow he moves. And if he's about to run into you, you can just press X and run away. Like you can actually roll. Like because you can roll and like to past Link can roll, you're able to get away from him faster. Like he moves, like he doesn't move in an unpredictable manner like in Link to the Past, because he moves more slowly and stuff like that. But then the problem comes racing back. See, instead of improving upon the original formula, they decided to make the exact same problem from Link to the Past come back. Well, at least it's not nearly as bad, because it doesn't respawn all of its health if you fall into the pit and forced to do the entire boss fight over again. Because that was just terrible. That was like ROM hack level bad game design. But unfortunately, you still have to constantly backtrack back to this place from the lower level once you get knocked into it, and get Castlevania knocked back all the way over to the pit. It's very tedious. Which is why I'm not editing it out, because it would be just a complete misrepresentation of how this boss fight is if I did. And plus, at the very least, it has an alternate challenge where only specific links can hit the colored balls. What breaks it is you can't poke it with your sword and hold the direction opposite to where it's sending you to avoid being sent into the pit. That was what you did in Link to the Past, and it made it tolerable there. And this boss fight actually works differently in the multiplayer version of the game. Two portals lead to the Dark World and a hammer. When the Link in the Dark World hammers a flying skull, the boss will freeze in the Light World. use the time to smash the color ball on the end of its tail. So it's actually even more unique in the multiplayer mode. For once, a multiplayer difference is actually something that couldn't have been achieved in single player and like wasn't the result of an oversight. And here we learned that Ganon got more powerful because he got a magical dark trident that came out of nowhere. Why was this necessary? Couldn't he have just been powerful? Like, was this... Like, wasn't he sealed away in the previous game in the timeline? How did he get unsealed? Like, cause... wasn't this supposed to be in the Twilight Princess timeline? Where Ganon was implied to have died forever because his Triforce vanished forever? What, I forget, was this after Twilight Princess or before it? It had to have been after... No, it couldn't have been after it because Midna destroys the Dark Mirror forever. So it couldn't have possibly come back in this game. Whatever. It's times like this where I can actually kind of understand why people completely dismiss the Zelda timeline. They clearly didn't make the games with the timeline in mind. And here we have the maidens all showing up at once and contacting Zelda as if you're supposed to actually care about them as characters and go, oh look, there are the crystals, they're all talking together. Isn't that cool? And it's weird, they call each other sisters. Are they literally sisters or is that just like a title thing? And they say frozen Hyrule when they said that it was only frozen because of Vati. So did the people of Hyrule name it? Like, did the people of Hyrule rename it Frozen Hyrule just because Vati froze it over? Is it going to be called that even after it gets unfrozen? Is it going to be called Unfrozen Hyrule? It's a name that doesn't really work considering the lore explanation. Like, it could have just been an icy area. Although, it's right next to a desert, so they really did need a magical explanation for why it's like this.